So I had a ton of laundry to fold, but I also needed to get a workout in. And so I decided to combine the two. So you'll see me here. I'm going pretty close to failure with these types of squats, a little more quad dominant. And as I get close to failure, I'm going to use my active recovery time to continue reinforcing that movement pattern. So you can see that I use that same movement to come down, grab some clothes, come back up, fold them, be a little more productive. But this is kind of a good representation of how we view fitness and health and training, working out nowadays, is we really separate them from our real life. So on the left, oh man, this guy goes to the gym for 2 hours a day, works really close to failure, just all in every day. Versus this person moves a lot and uses ranges of motion that most people don't. And it's important to distinguish between those two types of lifestyles, but they're not completely different. You don't have to completely separate them. It's not one or the other. You can do a workout for building strength, building muscle, improving endurance, all of these other fitness factors that are great and definitely improve your health. But on the other hand, that is usually all combined into 30 minutes or an hour of training, sometimes even 2 hours. And that's great if you're like a bodybuilder or have really specific strength goals. But what's even more important for most people, myself included, is incorporating movement, frequent movement throughout your day. So when I'm folding clothes, when I'm doing stuff around the house, I use movements that I have access to ensure that I don't lose them. And that ensures that I get that frequent movement. I explore those ranges throughout my day and keep my body healthy, so that on one hand I can strength train, and on the other hand I just stay healthy. Now this is just a little more strength training, right? Again, I like strength training. I'm not, I really promote active movement throughout your day, but I also strongly encourage dedicated time to train strength, hypertrophy, whatever goal you are trying to reach. So this day I just decided close grip pull-ups. I felt like my biceps were very recovered from the day before, and I wanted to isolate those a little more. Another thing I've been doing with my calisthenic movements is making sure that my core stays stable. That's an issue for me personally, given my FAI, labral tears, hip impingement, and my history. I had my gallbladder removed when I was 18, so I have scar tissue in my abdomen. I have some issues getting those core muscles active a lot. So this allows me to work on two things, right? I can build my upper body strength, my lats, my biceps, my pulling strength with this movement, but I can also focus on stabilizing my core, getting the right stomach muscles working during this movement, because without that solid platform of the core, without that lumbopelvic stability, any movement you do is less coordinated. The muscles closer to the joints that are moving have to compensate. But if we have that stable core, everything can move the way it was designed to, right? Another thing to note with pull-ups is I really like full range of motion. Full range of motion is one of the things people miss the most, especially with pull-ups, because you can do more pull-ups if you don't go all the way down. But going all the way down, stretching that muscle at the end is really, really important. So after pull-ups, I decided to do dips. I love dips. A lot of people can't do dips because they have shoulder mobility restrictions, or they just have a lot of discomfort when they're performing this movement. I was a swimmer growing up. My shoulder mobility is a little ridiculous, and I love dips. I really love them with the rings too because there's a little more stabilization that goes in with them. Now, I don't do ring dips all of the time, but I do really enjoy them. So if I'm feeling fresh, because they are difficult, especially with the rings, if I'm feeling fresh, if I'm feeling not fatigued, this is definitely something that I go for. Because again, I do have a lot of mobility in my shoulders. I use the rings to help encourage stability while I am moving through that full range of motion that I am lucky enough to have access to. And these are really the only two tools I use to work out right now. I stick a pull-up bar into the door frame, and then I put rings on it, and I can get pretty much everything I want done just with those two tools. So, and again, I'm super introverted. I don't like going to the gym. I don't like being around a ton of other people. So this is perfect for me. I set it up in my home office, and I can just do it whenever I want to. So with dips, again, I'm focusing on keeping that belly button pulled in, making sure my core is stable. Again, the abdominal surgeries, that is just something I need to focus on extra. So I keep my stomach nice and stable so that my shoulders, my scapula, my rib cage, everything can move the way it's supposed to, and we get a nice smooth movement instead of getting a bunch of pain and stiffness in the shoulders. And now, this is the last thing I like to do, especially on days where I have Kung Fu. Kung Fu is a lot of like quad and glute work. And so one thing I've had to focus on throughout the years, again, this also helps with hip impingement, FAI, labral tears, helps you balance out the hip muscles. I really love doing these hamstring curls, elevated hamstring curls with a little hip thrust at the end, hanging onto the rings. It's basically like if you were doing a lying leg curl machine, but you have a little more control over it, and you can get the hips into it a little more. So you do get some glute activation through there. So I just have, that block is just something I have lying around. You can use whatever. But the whole point is, again, keeping that core stable, pulling through the heels, and then at the end pushing up with the hips so we get the entire posterior chain working to balance out all of the quad, the pushing work that I do both in my workouts in my daily life and at Kung Fu. So from one perspective, yeah, I love, training strength for these muscles, but I also need that to help my hips and to balance out my training, right? So if you're like me and you struggle with hip impingement, I have a free soft tissue release course specifically for people with FAI labral tears. Check that out at paintoperform.com. Link will be in the description below. Thanks for watching this. I hope you got some lessons from it, and have a great day.